Welcome to the DawgNation Happy Hour, presented by Marlow's Tavern. A fun and laid-back look at everything happening around the Georgia Bulldogs and the latest UGA recruiting news there as well. Make sure you stop by the local Marlow's Tavern right there in your neighborhood and enjoy Happy Hour every weekday from 4 to 6 p.m. And now, for DawgNation Happy Hour, here's your host, Kaylee Mansell.
Hello, Dog Nation, and welcome to episode 4 of the DawgNation Happy Hour. We are coming to you live from Marlow's Brookhaven. Thanks to all of us that joined us tonight live, and thanks to all of you watching at home. So awesome to have you guys. I'm your self-acclaimed happy hour expert, Kaylee Mansell. I've never felt more at home than I do right now sitting at Marlow's Tavern Happy Hour.
Well, I've never been happier because typically speaking, we have one of these Marlow's events. You know, I'm kind of like Dick Van Dyke at the beginning of Mary Poppins. I'm like banging the drum and the cymbals and everything else. I'm having to host the show. But now I get to sit back and let Kaylee run the show. I get to sit over here and get in trouble in class. It's a much better experience for me.
Who's Dick Van Dyke? I know who he is.
I don't know why that image popped in my mind. That was the first one that came in. Okay. Just working very hard to keep people entertained.
Well, don't let Brandon sell himself short, because before the show we got to do a live Q&A with our audience members where Brandon kind of took the ropes. I feel like we're passing the torch at the moment.
Right.
I can see him relaxed as ever right now, kind of like our DawgNation Happy Hour intro that we have that you guys just got to hear.
That's exactly right. Kind of in my relaxed happy hour style voice for that. And I also like the fact that we're doing this in person. Not that I don't like seeing you via Zoom, but there's just something about being in person that makes the conversation a little bit more free-flowing, a little bit more truly relaxed, I would say.
Mm-hmm. And I have to add, I think this chair is a little bit comfier than the one in the studio, so I feel more relaxed.
A little bit.
Okay.
Just a more relaxed vibe all around.
So I want to start off today with a quote that actually came from our boss, BJ, this morning. I've been thinking about it all day. And Brandon, I know you're going to love this, but how awesome is it to know that tomorrow when we wake up on game day eve, the lousy stinking Gators could already be 0-1?
Oh, listen, yeah, absolutely. You know the crowd loves to hear that.
Yes.
I've got the original Gator Hater shirt on right now because it is a special thing in a young man's life when Florida takes his first loss of the season. First of many, probably, but you can't lose them all until you lose the first one, and that's what's going to happen tonight.
A close loss tonight. Close loss. Less than 6.5.
Yeah, Connor's got the Gators plus the points, which, listen, you talk about dirty blood money, winning a bet on Florida, that's my definition of blood money right there. That's dirty money right there.
Hey, look, it all cash is the same if it's right.
Fair enough.
So I kind of want to use that as a segue. You talked about this on your show yesterday. I kind of want to get everybody's perspective on it, but Connor, what are your thoughts on rooting for the SEC in non-conference games? Do you cheer for SEC teams, or does that not matter to you? You want to win who you want to win?
Yeah, I have no interest in seeing Florida win, Tennessee win, unless I happen to have money on them. And so, if they win, cool. If they don't, okay.
Have you always felt that way?
Yeah, I've never, and again, family is from the Northeast. I am not a true Southerner, I would say.
Yeah.
I've never understood cheering for SEC. I'm a diehard New England Patriots fan. I want the Jets to go 0-16.
Yeah.
I don't want AFC East supremacy. I don't root for an AFC team in the Super Bowl.
So I've definitely evolved a little bit with my opinion on this. Now, I've never cheered for Florida, nor will I ever cheer for Florida against anyone. But there was a time in my life when I probably did have a certain sense of SEC pride. As Connor said, the SEC chant. There was a time in my life when that SEC pride probably did mean a little something to me. But the SEC is not quite as southeastern as it used to be. You've got a Midwestern team like Missouri. You've got a team far west, or at least, Western, more Western, in Texas A&M, and those people are weird, let me just tell you. And then you're about to add Texas and Oklahoma. You've kind of lost the southeastern culture a little bit. My SEC pride is based on geography.
Yeah.
We share a certain soil. There's a certain kinship that comes from that. All of a sudden now, we're just a bunch of schools and programs with common financial interests. Hard for me to kind of cheer for that quite as much. So I would never cheer for Florida, but if it was a different SEC team in this spot, I might be tempted to them, like, say, LSU against Florida State. Typically speaking, I might have a little bit of SEC pride on the side of LSU there in a spot like that. But now that this league isn't quite as southeastern as it used to be, I don't quite feel that way as much as I used to.
I kind of feel like I'm in the middle of all of this. I think there are certain SEC teams that I root for more than others. I will never cheer for a Florida or a Tennessee. In fact, I hope Utah drops 50 on Florida tonight somehow, some way. But
Florida scores 44.
yeah, I'll go for like an Arkansas. But I think the only time that I would choose the SEC over anybody else is in bowl games. I think that bowl games is the only acceptable time because obviously you want to show SEC supremacy. But like you said, I feel like some of that is kind of taken away as our geography in the SEC expands. But I like that we're talking about money. Is anybody in the crowd, do any of y'all have money on games this weekend? Anybody bettors? Allegedly? Just Connor? Connor's the only one that's willing to admit it anyway.
They've got so much money bet on the games they don't want to admit it.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're afraid their wife may hear.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Or
I
their
forgot there's
husband
some
may
wives
hear.
in the room tonight. Well, what about betting on your own team?
I mean, it depends how confident you feel. I've never placed a wager on Georgia, but if you feel good about it, you feel good about the matchup, you know.
Yeah, my theory is in most cases there are better games to bet than Georgia, perhaps. Georgia was 8-7 against the spread a year ago. They were 15-0 on the field. They won all those games for the most part easily, with the exception of 2. You know, I don't know that following Georgia as closely as we do gives us a ton of necessarily great insight on which side of the point spread you're oftentimes going to end up on. Because here's what I'm here to tell you. If you can even find a line on this Georgia game right now, it's 6-7 touchdowns, something like that. Large spreads equal high variance. If you are a bettor, there's almost always a better game to bet than a game in which the favorite is like 30 or 40 points better than the underdog, which is what most Georgia games are. So if Georgia were playing more 7, 14-point games, something like that, I think it might be a little bit more fun to bet Georgia on a regular basis. But I don't love the high variance, high spread games for the most part.
And another thing exciting that y'all have coming out is your Go With The Flow show. We taped it yesterday, coming out, talking about the spread, but I kind of want to base this conversation around what is the ceiling and the floor for Saturday? What is the least amount that UGA could win by, and what do you think realistically is the most that we could win by?
What do you think?
I mean, they could lose.
Come on.
Oh, God, Connor.
I did spend this week
This isn't Nichols in 2016.
Connor's had a
Man,
little too much fun at happy hour.
we were a long ways away from that Nicholls State game.
That may be the worst. I don't want to say the worst day in Sanford Stadium history. That's close, though, right? We almost lost that day.
2014 Georgia Tech's pretty bad.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah,
2015 Georgia Southern wasn't much better.
Yeah, oof. I think you could see a game similar to Samford last year where Georgia sort of stalls in the red zone. They don't really know what they have going on at running back right now and, quite frankly, at kicker either. And so, it's something like they get up 36-0 or something like that, and then they just sort of run the clock in the second half, look to get out of there with a quick and easy win. I mean, the high end, Georgia's last game they played, they won 65-7, and that was against the second-best team in the country that year. So, it could be a name-your-score kind of day. I'd be surprised if we see that. I think Georgia's going to get up comfortably and then maybe pull things back a little bit.
So I will tell you, privately last year, I was a little bit worried about the fact that Georgia seemed so lackluster in the games that didn't really matter much. I was a little bit afraid that emotionally you could just flip the switch whenever you needed to. A lot of teams in sports have kind of tried to be that way in all sports, professional, college level. It oftentimes doesn't work. Last year for Georgia, worked with no problem. They got to the Tennessee game. They were a completely different team than they had been at any point in time since probably Oregon and South Carolina to begin the season. Georgia showed a year ago they are more than capable of flipping the switch on, flipping it back off, flipping it back on again. They were in full control of their performance. And so now there's a part of me that wants to say, come on, guys, show you can be the team that comes out with a razor's edge for 15 games. But last year they kind of showed that doesn't really matter all that much. So there's a part of me that sort of thinks they're going to play relatively lackluster on Saturday. I don't think they're going to play Brock Bowers very much. They hid Dominic Lovett on G-Day. I believe they're going to hide him again. The injured guys, Ladd, Dejan, Kendall,
Lassiter, Shema Munden.
They barely play them at all. Some of them won't play at all. I think that Georgia's more than happy just to get in, get out, and move on. And last year they proved it doesn't really matter. If they were playing somebody for the national championship this Saturday, they might win 65-7. I don't think they have any desire to beat, whatever it is, Tennessee Martin 65-7 on Saturday. I'm guessing it'll be 42-3, 42-7, something along those lines. But I don't believe it's going to be 70-0 or anything like that.
So you're saying Georgia doesn't cover?
I don't believe they will, no.
If I don't want to spoil our show on Friday, but Brandon and I were in simpatico this week in terms of picks. So make sure to tune in and see which way we've actually went.
That's right.
This.
I know I almost went and bought a lottery ticket after watching Go with the Flow yesterday. I think we're all going to be
right,
surprised by that. So I'm going to put Connor on the spot here for a second. Connor, you wrote an article the other day. I read it all the way through. We loved the narrative last year of Kirby telling the guys, everybody thought y'all were going to go 7-5 until Nolan Smith revealed that was not necessarily the case. It had been fabricated a little bit, but regardless, the narrative that we all loved. And you put out an article the other day on what it would look like if Georgia were to go 7-5 this year. What was the rationale behind that, and how did you determine those picks?
Well, every Georgia beat writer, media writer for other sites, they do their season predictions, and unsurprisingly, they all have Georgia going 12-0. And I thought, look, I don't want to be the fourth person to write that they're going to go 12-0, so I wanted to try a thought exercise and do something different. About 300 words into the story, I thought, this is incredibly stupid. It's very difficult to imagine this team going 7-5, in part because of the schedule that they play. Now, you can make an argument. I think maybe a game that is getting overlooked a little bit, maybe Kentucky with the receivers that they have. If Devin Leary is what he was when he was healthy at NC State, I think that's a team that maybe could give Georgia some problems. But again, they're not going to lose back-to-back games in some cases I predicted there. I don't think they're going to lose to Ole Miss right before they play Tennessee. I don't think they're losing to Florida. I think, it's one of those things when you look at it and it's like, okay, how awful could this season really go? 10-2, maybe 9-3 if injuries mount up, and you can't really predict that. And so, again, I think realistically, if you're doing a percentile odds, it's 40% chance they go 11-1, 30% chance they go 12-0, 15% chance they go 9-3, 10-2. I think overwhelmingly the odds are going to be this is either a 0-loss team or a 1-loss team playing in Atlanta at the end of the season.
I have to confess something, and this is not a super popular thing to say in a room full of such great Georgia fans like we have here at the Marlows in Brookhaven. I have a little bit of a beef with Nolan Smith over the 7-5 storyline. Because when Nolan told the story about, I made all this up going 7-5, it's incredibly funny. He's entertaining. He tells the story well. But to me, him pushing the whole idea of, we all said we were going to be 7-5 and we just made that up, to me that obscures the fact that last year Georgia really did have, I think, some legitimate, profound doubt about it coming into the start of the season. They, after all, unanimously thought to be behind both Alabama and Ohio State, and that was real. And some of the stuff they heard prior to the Tennessee game, I think, was legitimately real. Now, there's a part of me that thinks that Kirby Smart may have planted the anonymous coach quote with ESPN.com. That may not have been real, but the rest of it, in terms of folks picking Tennessee to win the game, that definitely was real. And some of that has carried over to this summer there as well. The stuff about Michigan, the stuff from Saturday on ESPN about Alabama. So as funny as Nolan Smith is when he kind of laughed and said, I made up the whole 7-5 thing, the truth is, a lot of people then take that to mean that all of the doubt about Georgia last year was made up. And I'm here to tell you, it wasn't all made up. Some of it was quite real.
Yeah, to that point, I don't understand why Georgia going for a third straight national championship isn't a bigger college football storyline. We hear so much talk in the preseason about Alabama. I know Game Day picked all three of them. They're all three of those Game Day hosts who I wouldn't trust to pick, my gardener. Not that I have a lawn. I still live in an apartment. You hear a lot of talk about USC. You hear a lot of talk about LSU, Florida State. This is something that hasn't been done in modern college football, and it's sort of being treated like a sideshow. Now, part of that is maybe because Georgia's schedule and the expectation that they'll be there at the end. But, I know I'm not that old. I'm old enough to remember on SportsCenter when they were talking USC every day in 2005. Alabama in 2013 when they were going for a three-peat. Those were major, major storylines at that point in time. And it kind of feels with Georgia right now, it's a cursory thing where one national media member will come in and ask it at a press conference. But when they go about it and talk on these TV shows, when they talk about it on pregame shows, it's not a major talking point, and I'm confused as to why that is the case.
So this is kind of a sort of halfway form to take, but I'm pretty confident I'm going to run with this. I believe in the 21st century, this would be the most significant sporting accomplishment, if it happens, I believe it will, a Georgia three-peat, go for 3 and 23, would be the most significant sporting accomplishment since the Patriots went for the undefeated season and came up a game short against the Giants.
Thanks for that reminder.
And prior to that, I think you got to go back to the Tiger Slam at the beginning of the century when he won all 4 majors consecutively, not within the same calendar year, but he won all 4 majors consecutively. In the 21st century, Georgia winning 3 straight national championships. I'll put it up with those 2 sporting accomplishments as the most significant thing that's been attempted, and if Georgia does it, the most significant thing that's been accomplished since the Tiger Slam.
I mean, I point out, there was the Serena Slam, and then there was the fact that she was going for the calendar Grand Slam of all 4 majors in a year. I believe Novak Djokovic did that as well, but we're not here to talk about tennis or anything along the lines of that. I do know, like the Lakers in 2002, three-peating there. I think
we've had a few three-peats. See, here's the thing. Yeah. I think this is an important point because I've said this in the show. A three-peat in college football means more than a three-peat in other sports.
Agreed.
We've seen Yankees in the 90s win, 98, 99, 2000. We've seen several NBA teams win 3 straight NBA championships in my lifetime alone. A three-peat in college football means so much more than a three-peat in other sports because college football just does not have a history of that.
I would especially say, too, in football, with the way, because of how physical it is and the turnover that comes with it, there's a reason you haven't seen a team in the NFL do it. The Chiefs have not been able to.
We haven't seen 3 straight Super Bowl teams anyway.
The Patriots have not done it. So I do think there is something to that in the game of football that makes it so difficult to be that good for that long.
Well, also, too, you have to think about it's a 4-team playoff right now, too. If you go for 3 and 23 with a 4-team playoff, I do agree with Brandon in the sense that it would be the greatest sport event happening of the 21st century just because it's so hard to get into the playoffs as is. You have to be practically perfect, or if you're a 1-loss, 2-loss team, the media has to decide that you are at the level of competition it takes to be a title contender. But how does that change when we go to a 12-team playoff?
Well, Kaylee, here's how I think it could change. Now, this is me being as optimistic as possible, but I believe there is evidence to support this. There's a chance that if Georgia could win this one this year, there's a chance with the expanded playoff, they go on a run unlike anything we've seen in college football. I said this back in the very early portion of the year at some point in time, that we have a tendency to want to say, is Kirby Smart the next Nick Saban? Maybe he is. Maybe that's what he's on his way to being. I think a better question may be, is he going to be, because of his age, is he going to be college football's version of John Wooden?
Yeah.
That if he wins this year, moving to expanded playoff, keep in mind, the FCS playoffs have been larger and expanded for a long time. North Dakota State's won 9 of the last 12, I think it is. 9 of the last 12 FCS national championships. Expanded playoffs make it easier for the better teams because the longer it goes, the more your talent, your depth, the more eventually that wins out. That if Georgia could win this one and enter into a 12-team playoff world where they are kind of the unquestioned power in the sport, whether the media acknowledges it or not, if they could be on that perch moving into the expanded playoff a year from now, then this run, and I know it sounds crazy and it sounds grandiose, this run could be only just getting started if that's the case.
The old Saban walked so Kirby could run narrative.
Maybe so.
Is John Wooden the top 5 all-time coach for you?
Say one more time.
Is John Wooden, you just mentioned he could be.
Oh, yeah.
Is he a top 5 all-time sports head coach for you?
I mean, there's a lot of complications to how he got all the players that he had. Watch the HBO documentary. I think given the amount of winning that he did, you would have to say that he probably
include him
is.
in there?
I think so, yeah.
I will say I took a coaching principles class while I was in school, and we had an entire chapter on John Wooden and his methods, and it did briefly mention some of the things that happened underground, but I thought that kind of spoke volumes about the kind of coach that he was and how well respected he is if he's already in my textbook.
That's exactly right. Famous for teaching people how to put on socks.
Yeah.
Everybody's
put
heard
on
that
the same
story
way,
before.
yeah.
So the reason I asked Connor the last question was all about rationale and reasoning, and so now I'm going to put Brandon on the spot here, and I know
All
that
right.
you guys give him heck for this on the show all the time. We got to talk about your Texas pick because that was painful for me to watch. Your preseason Final Four predictions, Texas.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to maybe change that if we give you the opportunity to? No harm, no foul.
I don't want to change it, but you're right to give me grief for it. I've kind of given myself grief for it. Here's the truth. So my Final Four is Georgia, LSU, Michigan, and Texas. Now,
Pitiful.
I don't feel good about my picks either, but here's what I'm telling you. We all have access to the same 133 teams. You got to pick 4 from somewhere. And right now, I don't love the 4 that are out there. I picked Michigan from the simple standpoint that teams that make the playoffs have a tendency to make them in bunches. You know, you see the occasional one-off like Washington or Michigan State, but typically when a team makes a playoff, they kind of go on a run where they make a few. This would have a chance to be Michigan's 3rd straight appearance. That's in keeping with other teams that have made the playoffs. That, to me, kind of makes some sense. I legitimately do believe that LSU is one of the 4 best teams. You know, I don't love Brian Kelly as a person. I certainly don't love his family accent. But Kelly can coach. You know, his tenure at Notre Dame, when they continually beat lesser competition, they had a long winning streak against unranked teams. You're not a good coach. You're not a bad coach if you're doing that kind of thing. Kelly clearly is. So easy to put for me LSU in there. Easy for me to exclude Alabama. They literally don't have a quarterback. Ohio State's just too soft. Easy for me to exclude them there as well. So who's your 4th going to be? As much as it pains me to admit, I do believe that Quinn Ewers, when he was healthy a year ago, this was one of the best quarterbacks in college football. I think he still is. I don't know that Steve Sarkisian's this level of coach right now, but they do get a chance to take advantage of what I believe is a softer Big 12 than the SEC they're going to be in a year from now. We're going to find out a lot week 2. I believe that Texas is going to go into Tuscaloosa, win the game. They could still lose and make the playoff, but it would certainly make me feel better about this Texas pick if they could go into Bryant-Denny Stadium, win that game. They almost won it a year ago, after all.
Kaylee, why do you hate Texas?
Horns down. I mean, just
that's not a reason.
No, I know. I've been doing that since we've been here. It's not that I don't hate Texas. I just think that there's so many other picks. Like I don't think that they're going to come into this conference and immediately establish their dominance.
But they're
over
also
teams
perpetually
that have been
overrated.
Here.
They're perpetually overrated.
I mean, they get so much national media attention. It's like I felt like Georgia had to earn their right to have their national media attention, and I feel like Texas is just a team that everybody wants to bring up every single year, and they don't have the stats to back it up. So it's not that I hate them. I just think that there are other picks that are a little bit wiser.
All right, so who are those picks then?
My picks are Ohio State, Florida State, Georgia, and USC.
That is awful.
See, the USC thing, to me, comes down to defense. Not even against a playoff level team like San Jose State last Saturday.
San Jose, not a state, should be pointed out.
San Jose is actually not a state. That's a good point. So that's my issue with USC. I don't love what they do defensively. And then I think that Florida State's really interesting. If you care about gambling and stuff like that, from a power rating standpoint, they were probably power rated top 5 at the end of last year. They were one of 4 teams in the country that may have been a single-digit underdog to Georgia by the end of last season. But if you also kind of broaden this out to like former 4- and 5-star recruits on the roster, their blue chip ratio is actually only about 41%. That's lower than national championship teams typically are in terms of the ratio of former 4- and 5-star recruits. So transfer portal's been good to them. Jordan Travis is a very good quarterback. LSU, Florida State's a fun game on Sunday. Sneaky, though, I don't quite know. They've got the overall talent level of a playoff team. And keep in mind, they haven't beaten Clemson in 7 years.
I also think Mike Norvell is not a good in-game coach. They found a way to lose games last year that they should have. And let's remember that LSU game. Like, yeah, they beat LSU. LSU drove the length of the field and lost on a missed extra point. Like, that was not some great Florida State win there that season. I've got Georgia. I've got Michigan, but I could just as easily see Ohio State. I think there are maybe now too many people on the Michigan bandwagon. I've got Clemson because I still think there's talent there, and with what they have and the schedule that they have, I think a one-loss ACC champion Clemson is going to get into the playoff.
I also think Garrett Riley is the best hire of the offseason by anybody.
And so I think with Clemson, like if they beat South Carolina last year instead of losing that game, they're probably playing Georgia in the college football playoff, and we're not playing Ohio State. And I think that's a very different way that the season unfolds. And then my 4th team, I think the Pac-12 is the deepest league in terms of teams at the top and teams that could realistically win that conference. I think Washington is the most balanced. I love not just what Michael Penix, their quarterback, is. They have some studs at wide receiver. They all come back from last season. And so I think they're the most balanced team in that league. The schedule sets up favorably for them. They get a bye before they play Oregon. They do get USC, Utah back-to-back. But if they split those games and they go on to win the Pac-12 as a one-loss champion, I think they're getting in.
And Kaylee, I'll tell you what I think a sneaky good Week 1 game is. It's Washington against Boise State.
Yeah.
I believe that Boise State's one of the best Group of 5 teams this year. Group of 5 is down a good bit from where it was a couple of years ago. I think Boise State's one of the better Group of 5 teams. I don't know that Washington's a playoff level team, but they're certainly a playoff contending team.
Yeah.
That's a really good measuring stick game. If you can go out there, if you beat Boise by a couple of touchdowns, you have certainly sent the message that you're to be taken seriously, I believe.
I believe they also have Michigan State on their schedule as well. So they're going to have a pretty, if they win those games, and obviously they have to go out there and do it, they're going to have a pretty decent resume there at the end of the season that I think is going to be unassailable.
Okay, so now I want to focus on this weekend's game because we have a lot of time to debate playoff picks, talk about the season as it goes on. But I think the question that everybody really wants to know, I'm going to give to you, Connor. You are our Athens resident. You're there in it all the time. How concerned do we realistically need to be about injuries, not just in the short term, but in the long term too?
Yeah, long term, I don't think there's anything too much to worry about right now. I don't think we see Small Munden on Saturday, but I think he's continuing to trend in the right direction there. I don't think we see Kamari Lassiter, but again, that foot injury, I don't think it's a long-term thing, and I actually think it's going to give them a chance to look at guys like a Julian Humphrey, Nyland Green, Dalen Everett to find out what they have at that cornerback position. The only position right now that I would say we're worried about injuries would be that running back one, and that's very clearly just going to be something that is week to week this season. But as anyone knows, football is a violent game. There are going to be injuries that get picked up over the course of the season. I don't think anybody would have sat here, at a Marlow's Tavern a year ago and said at the beginning of the year, yeah, outside linebacker is going to be a position of worry for us. Nolan Smith goes down. Chaz Chambliss goes down in the Ohio State game with an injury. Robert Beal wasn't 100% in that game. Marvin Jones was playing with a separated labrum for the entire year. So these things can develop quickly over the course of the season. But right now, I think Georgia, for the most part, long-term, is in a good place.
I think the biggest concern that Georgia fans have for Saturday is how they're going to get around campus with that bridge closed off with the chain-link fence. I have no idea who asked for this. I still don't know who this is supposed to benefit. I think it may be better for the people inside the stadium in terms of, to use a fancier word than I should use, their egress. You get a chance to kind of move around a little bit better, I guess. But that may be the biggest concern for Georgia fans, the fact that the bridge is going to be fenced off.
Okay, so as we are getting to our halfway point, we're going to bring on our next set of guests, Jeff Sintel and Mike G. But the last thing I want to ask you guys, both of you, Connor, we'll start with you. Just in general, what are you most looking forward to on Saturday?
I've had some complaints about them before. I'm not a big fan of the Who, but I'll tell you what, when it's right before kickoff, and I do this a few times sitting next to Brandon, I've been fortunate enough to do it. They start playing Babbo O'Reilly, everyone's on their feet, getting loud. That's a really special environment, and I'm very, very happy that I get to still experience that and see that and take place of that. Because in reality, that's what makes college football special, those game day atmospheres, the environment that you get to see that there. So when they get that cranked up and going, there's an inside joke. I can tell one of my friends about it. You can ask me about it later. When they start cranking Babbo O'Reilly at Sanford Stadium, that's when I know, A, fall is here, and B, football season has started.
I totally agree. I love the pregame traditions that take place there. There's also this thing that I do after the game, and this is a very dorky thing, I'll admit this. But speaking of the bridge, we finish our post-game show there at the UGA bookstore, and I'm kind of walking back across the bridge, go back to my car, and
not going to be able to do that.
Huh?
You might be able to do that.
Listen, I'll show my face. I'll be able to get through. I'm kidding. I'm kidding, y'all. The point is, historically, when the bridge was open, I'll walk there, I'll stop, and I'll look. The stadium always looks so awesome when it's nighttime like that. The lights are still on. You can see the sports writers in the press box. They're still typing away and working. At least a good handful of them are pretty late like that. And you kind of remember what happened during that game. You reflect on the fact that you've only get a chance to do this like 6 times a year. I've been doing this now for more than 40 years, as crazy as that sounds. And I don't know. There's and I know this is like a nerdy thing to say, but there's just such an incredible poignance to me for that, where you just stand there and you just take it in, how cool the stadium looks. The trash is all spread all over the place. People have been in there. It's kind of the calm after the storm because the game has been over now for hours. And I just find myself wanting to soak that up because college football is a weird sport. Our sport goes by like that. We have the longest off season, the shortest in season. The home games themselves are a very small number. And I just kind of find that moment to say, stop, appreciate this. It's going to be a couple of weeks in some cases before you get a chance to come back. And in November, it's going to be several months before you get a chance to come back. But it's just one of those things I enjoy doing.
So neither of us said something pertaining to the actual football being played on Saturday.
I really don't have much for you in the football game. It's going to be as bad as Georgia wants it to be.
Yep.
Well, Connor, Brandon, thank you so much for being the first two panelists that we've had. So awesome to hear your guys' opinions. And Connor coming up from Athens, thank you. I'm excited to see you guys on game day.
Now, you do realize you're going to have to fill for how, I don't even see Jeff.
No, I have a clear eye view
Okay.
of Jeff. I've been keeping an eye on him.
Just start
All
making
right.
your way
Yeah,
here. That
Jeff,
way we have a more
give us
seamless
your model
transition. We are live.
Exactly. If this were like the David Letterman show, we'd have some walking
Okay,
music to play,
yeah.
but we don't really
Right.
have that. All right, I'm going to step away and let
A
them
little
come up here.
B-roll.
I'll wait for, I guess, Mike Griffith to reappear.
Yeah, in the meantime, we can give a hand for Brandon and
Yeah.
Connor.
And by the way, I will say this, that I told you today, oh, people can see me, let me sit down.
I don't
I told you today
see
I was going to make a huge announcement here at the Marlows. I haven't made that announcement. I can't tell you what it is right now. I will tell you tomorrow morning, though, on DawgNation Daily. So tune in, get a chance to hear what everybody here behind has already heard. Big announcement. We got a chance to make it. I can't wait to tell you about it on DawgNation Daily tomorrow.
No one is better at this. Like, I just... And, like, unless you do it, unless you live it, like, you just don't understand how good Brandon Adams is at these transitions and doing those types
Oh,
of things. It is
100%.
just unbelievable.
All right, Jeff, we're going to have you come on. Mike's on the phone. We'll get him on in a second. Connor, if you want to stay on for a second.
I'll stay on
cool
until
with
Mike's
that.
ready.
I do want to use this halfway point to give a
Here
huge
comes
shout
Mike.
out to Marlow's. Thank you so much for letting us host this awesome event here and for being our presenting sponsor. Happy Hour at Marlow's. Can't beat it. 4 to 6. Yes, I love the applause. There we go. 4 to 6 every weekday. Don't miss it. Maybe we'll have another one coming up for you guys. But Jeffrey Santel,
How are you, ma'am?
Uncle Jeff.
First of all, isn't Kaylee great? Isn't she comfortable? And doesn't she act like she's been doing this for like 19 years already?
And Mike G coming to us off
Yeah.
the phone on
Yeah.
Five Bomb earlier.
Yeah, well, that was Coach Pruitt, and he's coaching with his dad and coaching his two kids, and obviously we had Coach Pruitt on DawgNation last year every week, and I had asked him if he wanted to do it again, and he said he's just really dialed in, working with his kids and down there back in Alabama. So interesting phone call to get, but certainly a guy that was a big part of Georgia and what happened with facilities.
Asheville High School, is that right?
Down there, yeah, I think he's down there near Fort Payne. I'm not sure
Yeah.
what the high school is, but
Yeah.
that was just a quick call from him, and he said he really enjoyed doing the show on DawgNation last year, but this year he's going to stay pretty much dialed in on that program, getting an opportunity to work with his father and with his kids, coaching his two kids. So, trying to make the most of obviously a pretty tough situation for Coach Pruitt.
I do say that Coach Pruitt and I have one thing in common. I used to watch him on two-a-days growing up with my father, and we have made the same mistake. The first time that I had asparagus, I thought it was a really long green bean, and he also did the same thing. So we share that. But my first question goes to Jeff, and this is more so a personal question that I have for you. I do Before the Hedges with you, produce your show. I've spent countless hours with you on the sidelines. And I just want to know, how do you have an analogy for everything? Is it like a book of analogies, or like are they just straight off the dome?
I think it's kind of, it's kind of funny. My mom, for instance.
Here comes the analogy.
Yes.
My mom is like her career, and she's retired. She's doing great. She doesn't see her grandkids enough, of course, because I don't take them up to see her. But like she was a bank teller for her profession, and my mom was the bank teller that would make the other bank tellers mad because everybody would want to wait in her line. And I think it's kind of like, and she didn't have like amazing lollipops or anything like that. People just wanted to talk to her, and I think, you think about the blessings we have in this life, and I think it's just an ability to talk to people and like make them feel comfortable. I think that's one of the things that. And it's funny, the typical Southern cliche is like my mother. One time my dad always had this thing that there was a wrong number, and my mom talked for like 2 hours on a wrong number. Because they're like, oh, you're talking about the Graybacks or the Andersons. They live down the road. No, they moved. Oh, did you go to school with them? Blah, 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 blah. I don't know. I just think I've read a lot, and it's just being able to think quick and just being exposed to a lot, I guess. But I think it's funny, when I started showing up on Brandon's show, I'd been a reporter for 15 years already when I was on Brandon's show, 2015. And everybody started calling me like the master of the metaphor or something like that. And I'm like, dude, I'm just a reporter trying to make things interesting to make Brandon stop talking so I can have a chance to talk a little bit. So tough task, but I got a question for you. And I know Mike has a really strong answer on this, but like, this is a game at Sanford where the Dogs are going to play at night.
Yes.
And I think by the time 8 o'clock, yeah, that's worth a clock. That's worth a clock. Does everybody remember the last time the Dogs played at night in Sanford? South Carolina, the Arch Manning game. Remember that when he was in the stands? But like, this is going to be the red lights, the LEDs. First of all, whatever they did with those LED purchases right there, I mean, I know they do it all the time on recruiting visits, but those things have rarely ever been seen.
Yeah, there's been no return on investment.
That's like Christmas lights. You know that grandma's Christmas light you have up in the attic, and they only work about 30 times a year? That's the red LED lights at Sanford. But so I want to think about, there I go, I broke out another one, right? But so I think about, and I know, Kaylee is beyond her years. She has amazing music taste. And currently, Mike knows that during the red light special in the fourth quarter Light Up Sanford, they play the Kanye West song Power. What would you like to change that to? Would there be a different song there for hype, for emotion? Like you could start thinking about something by Future, you could start thinking about something else by Kanye, something by Eminem, something by Travis Scott, because listen, it's a gimmick for the recruits, really. Let's face it. Recruits love it. Everybody don't care what they play. They're not going to play Ray Charles, Georgia on My Mind. I know that. They're not going to play that. What would you like to hear that music change to, Mike? This is what we talk about on UT Martin Week.
I've never really given it much thought, Jeff. The well's dry here. I'm just covering the game, man. I mean, the ambiance is great. When I think about the red lights, I think about the Notre Dame game. I think about how it affected the crowd. I think how it affected the players. I think about how it made a difference. I believe in the outcome of that game. I think there were 6 false starts or illegal procedure penalties that night that they played Notre Dame. That was a game they could have easily lost. That was the first red light game. So when I think about the red lights, I think about the historical significance of them kicking it off. I think about how playing name opponents in Sanford Stadium like Notre Dame makes a difference. As far as the music, I like the whole Go Georgia Bulldogs by the Redcoat Band. And that to me is like the most Georgia song out there. And I like the tradition of that. But as far as in-game stadium music, I'll be honest.
So
I like the band. I don't want to hear rock and roll music blasted through the speakers. I like to hear the band play. I like to be at a college game, not an NFL game. So I guess I'm the old fuddy-duddy here. And I'm going to top your phone call story. You were talking about wrong numbers and talking 2 hours. I kind of want to get this off my chest. When I was in high school, we had payphones. And I did call random Alaska numbers, collect to see if I could get people to talk to me in Alaska and tell me what the weather was like. And I did connect. And they did announce that somebody was calling Alaska from the school payphones. And please don't do that. And it was me. And I waited a long time to get that off my chest.
So I think charges will be dropped, right? Statute of limitations.
It was a long time ago.
So inside baseball, Mike, it's the fourth quarter. You're hovered over a laptop, clickety-clack, hitting keys. Do you look up and at least watch the red lights, or are you in the zone where you don't even pay attention?
I mean, yeah, I mean, you glance at it, but yeah, I mean, what we're doing is we're writing 2 or 3 stories at once, and Connor knows this. You can look at his story count. It's unbelievable. While that game's going on, we're writing 2 or 3 stories, so when the game ends, we hit send. Jeff's on the field playing photographer, getting hundreds of shots of all the players and the recruits and the coaches. And now, don't get me wrong, that environment is awesome and I enjoy it, but I don't think I can really sit back, Kaylee, and just kind of, just soak in the ambience of the night, because there's a lot of folks that want to know about the game, and we have a responsibility to try to bring you as much information as we can as accurately as possible. So again, I know that's, fans are like, look, why are we here listening about Mike's job? But so to answer your question, no, it's not because I don't want to. It's just when we go into the fourth quarter, you better have 2 or 3 stories half written if you're going to deliver on deadline.
Oh, he gave you plenty of time to think about it.
He did give me plenty of time. I am going to have to disagree with Mike. I think that music defines moments. Like, there are a lot of songs that I listen to, and I think to myself, like, okay, I was this place and this time when I heard that song. So I do think that music can kind of bring certain memories, but I feel like it's got to be a timeless classic, something that not only you would know, but your grandparents would know and your kids would know, something that is just never going to go away. I don't know specifically what that would be, like something like a Thunderstruck or like a Highway to Hell, something that's going to be around for a long time that gets everybody amped up, not just one specific group, because you got to know your audience. So I do think, though, that music is really important. Think about, like, nobody cares about Virginia Tech football, but everybody knows that when they come out, Enter Sandman is playing. You know, St. Florida Gators, it's I Won't Back Down, Tom Petty. Like, these teams are known for that despite maybe not being the best team. So I do think that music is important.
Yeah, I think Florida may have to change that Don't Back Down. No, I'm just kidding. That's fine.
We're going to try to cover. Is that the new is that the Tom Petty ballad? Late, great Tom Petty, of course. So we derailed your segments, but we had to have fun there.
Wait a minute. We
did. She loved that question. I know she did.
Well, you guys, I know that. I don't know if y'all ever watched the Next Generation series that Jeff and I did back a couple months ago, but we used to film. Sometimes we would film 2, sometimes we would film 6, and they were like 7-minute segments that we could have knocked out in probably 10 or 15 minutes, but we would just B-roll the tape, and they'd end up being like 2.5 hours long for 2 segments, because Jeff and I would sit there and talk offset about music and like the most random things, and I know Michael Carvel in the booth absolutely hated it because he would have to sit there and cut all of that out. But like, I wish that was some of the stuff that y'all got to hear. Is like
we would do this on the tape, like, okay, we're
yeah,
gonna
like, don't listen to this, please don't.
We're talking about Georgia football now. This is your edit point.
Yes, but we will talk some Georgia football. Jeff, I'm going to come to you first. You have the opportunity of covering the young guys, their recruitment trail, what gets them to Georgia. So I know you know a lot about this freshman class, and obviously because of injuries and our strength of schedule these first 2 games, we're going to get to see a lot of those guys play. Who are you excited for, and then who do you think is going to be an underdog guy that maybe hasn't been talked about that much but can make a huge difference, especially within these first couple of games?
Yeah, there's a lot of them. You know, I think the kicker, everybody, this is what I say every year. My answer to the question the year prior, who's the most likely freshman to start? And I said it was Brett Thorson because he won the punter job. The most likely freshman to start on this team, maybe not the most likely first rounder, is the kicker, Peyton Woodring. #1 kicker in the country out of Louisiana. Heck of a baseball player, really kind of self-made, self-taught kicker, iron will. He's got, I'm gonna localize it for a different generation. He has style. He was the guy that wore it. Everybody watches Before the Hedges. Do you remember when the young man wore like the Miami Vice suit to prom? It was like, you know, a neon blue with pink accents. I want a kicker that will rock that at prom because he's not going to care about nerves. He's not care about anything else. I think it's probably 10 years old now to say he's got a lot of swag, but he's got a lot of mental confidence. I think he's still the most likely first-year freshman starter on Saturday for Georgia. I think the outside linebacker position is going to be loaded. Georgia's going to have to twist in about a year or 2. The defensive line, they're going to move 4 veteran bodies off the defensive line. They're not really going to have a replacement for that, but they're going to have different plus players in different spots. Watch number 33, C.J. Allen, really special linebacker on the come up right now at Georgia. I really think that Andrew Paul, number 3, he's a guy that, folks, before he hurt his ACL last year, everybody that watched camp, was around the team, really studied Georgia, they were thinking, okay, this 3-star out of Dallas, Texas, from a private school might be the best back here compared to Branson Robinson. Of course, he ripped up his knee, but Andrew Paul, if you ask folks that really know, and I'll use a Brandon term here, if you ask somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who really knows something, they're going to tell you that maybe Andrew Paul looks like the next bell cow back at Georgia. Everybody's going to be worried about the injury here, the injury there. Are they going to rely on walk-ons? But I think Andrew Paul, still a redshirt freshman, is going to have a lot of bright moments in Athens. So many DBs, I could go on and on and on. But I want you guys to, and this will be a story that comes up on DawgNation probably tomorrow, at least by game day. Look for the freshman tight end, Pierce Sperling III, Georgia family. They've had 25 years of season tickets. Everybody's going in the family. Think about this, guys. All you guys watching, all you guys here at Marlow's tonight, we're so thankful for. Think about think about the son or the grandson or the nephew. As much as you love Georgia, think about going to a game, and that young man you've known all your life, you've seen at Thanksgiving dinner, is playing for the Dogs. He's going to do big things for Georgia, even though he's coming off a collarbone. He's looking great right now. He's got a really special family story for the game, and that's something we'll share with you guys tomorrow as well.
I want to go to Mike next. One thing that I admire about you in particular is how sure you are of yourself and your opinions, because I do feel like in the media a lot of people will try to adapt their opinions based on what they think their audience wants to hear. And I think that you do a really good job of being for sure about yourself and your picks and your opinions. And so heading into tomorrow, other than it's essentially a for sure shot that Georgia is going to win, what is one thing that you are for certain of? Whether it's Carson Beck's going to throw for 4 touchdowns or the defense is going to have so many interceptions, what is one thing that you are 100% confident that is going to happen on Saturday?
Well, I mean, I think the intensity. I mean, listen, there's a lot of people with a lot to prove, and it's UT Martin, and they drew the short straw. I mean, I feel bad for them. Mike Bobo has something to prove. Even though I look at his track record and I see the highest scoring offense in history was the 2014 Bulldogs with Hudson Mason, and the SEC all-time leading passer was Aaron Murray, coached by Mike Bobo, and the winningest Georgia quarterback in history was David Green when Mike Bobo was the QB coach. And the richest number 1 overall draft pick in NFL history was Matthew Stafford, coached by Mike Bobo. And he has such a rich and illustrious resume, not to mention that he played for the Dogs, and you can still find him in the record book in some places. And I think that people want to see some points scored, and I think that Mike Bobo is going to call that game that way. And when they do give, and I am pretty confident that they're going to give Brock Vandagriff and Gunnar Stockton some snaps, not necessarily as a threat to Carson Beck, but because they have to develop depth. If you think about the 2021 season, the fact that Stetson had started several games in 2020 helped a great deal, and he was called upon to win the championship that year. You think about 2017, Eason went down early, and it was Jake Fromm that came in, and thank goodness that he had a running game to help boost him until he could, pass efficiently enough to help win that score fest in the Rose Bowl and put you in a position to win the national title before your defense lost it, not Jake Fromm. So I think the intensity, Kaylee, I think you're going to see an aggressive game plan. I think Mike Bobo is going to call it to the final whistle. Typically, Kirby is kind of taking the air out of the ball in the fourth quarter, and I'm not saying that he won't do that to some extent. He is a sportsman. He's not going to try to run it up on UT Martin and get ugly. That's not the way Kirby does it. He doesn't try to impress people with numbers. But he does need these young quarterbacks to get some repetitions throwing the ball in game action just in case something happens to Carson Beck down the stretch.
Jeff, do you have anything to add to that? Anything that you are for certain that is going to occur on Saturday?
I think people are going to have a good time in Athens. I know that. I think that there'll be I don't know how you guys, your rituals on game day. But one of the things I love is that sometimes and this is what I learned when I was an intern for Mr. Munson, was like sometimes when you get on campus, he told me this, and Munson was in his 70s probably at the time. He's like, when you get on campus, find a way to take the long way to where you want to go on campus. Like go around this area, go through this tailgate, go through this quad. Don't take the straight shot through a game day in Sanford Stadium or a game day in Athens. That's what I do. I like to try to meander through the place. I like to try and, what are they cooking? Or like, it smells so great. Gives me a little bit of taste before we all kind of clock in what it's called work. But it's actually a heck of a lot of fun to cover this team. It is. I'm grateful for this job. I think a lot of the players, the insight I've gleaned from a lot of the players is no matter how much they've won and how big the rings are, they're really grateful to be a Georgia Bulldog because they know what that means. They know you're going against the best players in the country. There's not this sense of entitlement. I think it's not just a Kirbyism when they talk about eating off the floor. I think a lot of people kind of nail it when they say that the team that would beat Georgia this year might just be Georgia. Complacency, getting too overstuffed, I guess is the way to say that. The one thing about the game that comes to my mind is I hope Georgia doesn't expose players trying to chase points. What I mean by that is you're going to try to put up 350 yards through the air, 400 yards through the air, and what if that happens at the expense of one of your receivers, the attrition of a season, or like you mentioned, gamesmanship by Kirby Smart. If you're trying to ice a game and you're trying to do that with the run game, maybe that's not the best call right now when you're talking about Georgia's another kind of walkthrough game next week. I call it NFL preseason for the Dogs. But, if you're trying to grind clock in the fourth quarter, maybe it should look more like a G-Day tomorrow with a lot of screen passes. They don't run the ball a lot rather than getting your running backs dinged up, because I think Georgia, the way these two games are supposed to go, they're probably going to need about 80, 85 carries out of the run game. And you got to split those up amongst a lot of guys. I don't think you need to give a lot of those to Kendall Milton, Dejon Edwards, Andrew Paul. I mean, even the freshman Roderick Robinson, guys, he looks like an absolute Humvee on the field. Number 0, about 5'11", about 235 right now. He can grind some clock, but I think they want to try to save the tread on the tires of a lot of those backs. Maybe the walk-ons get a lot of carries, but I just love the renewal of every season in Athens. That's one of the things I'm certain of. Everybody's going to be excited, and the Dogs are going to put on a show.
Well, as we conclude here, I will give you guys the same final question that I gave to Connor and Brandon. Mike, what are you most looking forward to for Saturday?
Oh, man. Just I guess the totality of what 2023 Georgia looks like, whether it's Carson at quarterback, a receiver coming out of the slot, maybe less double tight end, more 3 wide. What does the defense look like? Kirby's talked about doing some things differently, and I don't expect them to spill the playbook. Certainly, they're going to keep some things back that they don't really need to do. But it's a new season. This team has a different personality. We're not going to see number 88 out there. What they call they call him Baby Rhino in the NFL. We're not going to see Nolan Smith getting everybody hyped up. We're not going to see Stetson rolling around, playmaking or having Kirby come over to him or it's going to be a different look. And every team is different, and the personality of this team will evolve. And, tomorrow's the opener. I don't know how much we're going to be able to get out of it, Saturday, because of the level of opponent. But it is a night game, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Aren't you? I think you're going to be in the press box, right? That's going to be a different
Yes,
right?
I will be there.
That's going to be part of it, too. I mean, we're already seeing a different look for DawgNation with Kaylee, and I think you'll be doing a Saturday morning show. So.
Yes.
For our team, there's going to be changes as well. So, like Jeff said, every year it's a little bit different. It's the same brand, but there's some changes, and the flavor of Georgia football might be a little different. I look forward to seeing that every year, Jeff.
Uncle Jeff?
So you kind of touched on what I was thinking, and I'm not going to try to channel my inner Brandon Adams here and deliver a pitch or promote some things, but folks. And I'm not going to try to go Dusty Rhodes or anything like that, sports wrestling and entertainment. But, folks, we're doing more this year at DawgNation. We're going to have a robust new Kick A-double S website. We're going to have certain things on a DawgNation.com homepage that you've never seen before, especially even taking it a level up from what the website has looked over the last 2 or 3 months where we've kind of upgraded our website. We're going to have a pregame show. We're going to have the amazing, always usual standard post-game show with Brandon Adams as well. But we want to build a bigger, badder, better DawgNation, more social media, more pregame, more postgame, more in-game. We think you guys deserve it. We think you guys have an insatiable appetite for Georgia juice, and we're here to deliver the juice. We got a bigger team. We got a whole new squad, and I'm certain that you guys are going to enjoy it.
I couldn't agree more. We have so much coming to you in store on Saturday. And how about a night game? This is my first night game, so I was going to say that's probably the thing that I'm most looking forward to is getting to experience that and not be in 100-degree weather because it's hard to be productive in that. But regardless, they finally gave us one, and I just want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. It's been so awesome to see your faces, and you guys have given us the energy that we want Happy Hour to have. And to all of yes, clap to you guys.
So just say happy hour and you get this crowd going, right?
Me too. And to all of those at home, thank you so much for tuning in. We wish you guys could be here, but your role is just as important. And so thank you for continuing to watch each and every week. And shout out to Marlow for allowing us to host this awesome event here. They have a great happy hour every weekday, 4 to 6. If you got FOMO from tonight, you can catch it any other day of the week. Thank you guys so much. Yes, Bowers for Heisman. I'm with that. All right, guys, have a good night, and it's game day eve tomorrow morning when you wake up. Go watch the Florida Gators get their butts beat. Have a good night, everyone.